HBO's already being panned adaptation of Naughty Dog's absolutely genre-changing video game for PlayStation, Last of Us, is going to come out very soon. Pedro Pascal, an Ellie that looks like she has a developmental disability, intersectional casting, and an admission by the show writers themselves that it's not even going to follow the story of the original video game, leave a lot of people going,
It's pretty goddamn stupid.
Well, I guess we're both disappointed with each other then.
well, this article just dropped from Comic Book Movie and it tells us what could have been. Now, I'm not saying this would have been better than what we're going to get from HBO Max. One of the reasons, not the least of which being that it includes Neil Druckmann, destroyer of franchises himself. But this article tells us that The Last of Us could have been and was in development as a film that would have been directed by Sam Raimi. The article is entitled The Last of Us. Caitlin Dever and Maisie Williams were in talks to play Ellie in a now scrapped movie adaptation. Bella Ramsey ultimately landed the role of Ellie in HBO's The Last of Us series, but both Maisie Williams and Caitlin Dever were in line to play the character in, as I mentioned, Sam Raimi's now defunct feature adaptation. Yeah, this is another could have been. I wonder why. I wonder why it got canned. Now, as I mentioned, The Last of Us is set to premiere later this month, January in 2023. But before this, God, this whole thing just looks stupid. There was a big screen theatrical adaptation out there with Sam Raimi attached to direct. Now, both he and Neil Druckmann, of course, from Naughty Dog, were working with Screen Gems, but they struggled to compress the game's 15 hours of story and gameplay into a feature-length narrative. Well, to me, I think it's pretty simple. 2 movies. You don't need to fill it out with 3 like The Hobbit did. Every time I watch The Hobbit, I go off, this should be 2 movies. All right, I'm going to stop. But this could have been a cliffhanger movie. And you guys can pick any point in the story where that could have happened. Quote, Sam Raimi gave really solid notes, but it was an impossible task, Neil Druckmann told The Hollywood Reporter.
Don't bullshit me! Don't you fucking bullshit me!
Quote, they were also told to add more spectacular action set pieces. So to change what was a perfect story and a perfect amount of action, God, if you played that game, how much more action did it need? But Druckmann said he began to realize that the studio really didn't understand, oh God, what made the game so special. Yes, trans representation, masculine women, and murdering any Caucasian mature males as role models because that's intersectional feminism. Now, this article says, thankfully the film was scrapped. I absolutely disagree with this. Now, would Maisie Williams and Caitlin Dever have at least looked and acted more like what I think Ellie would be? Maybe. With Neil Druckmann involved, the problem with this is that the entire taint, yes, and I use that word in every way possible, the entire taint of what Naughty Dog did to The Last of Us Part 2 would have obviously been absolutely pushed into this movie as well. If you're going to ask me, in my opinion, I think the reason why this movie got shelved is because of Druckmann, not because of Sam Raimi. Of course, The Last of Us, if you're not aware of it, please go watch some gameplay. Is set 20 years after modern civilization has been destroyed and centers on the relationship between Joel, who is the protagonist of the entire franchise, which was murdered by Neil Druckmann. He's a smuggler in this new dystopian world with Ellie as a teenage girl who may be the cure for a deadly pandemic. Now, the characterization of Joel within the video game is he is a hardened, burned out survivor who has lost everything and is just kind of going along in a dystopian world infected by zombies. Complicated. Watch the gameplay. But he's hired to smuggle. Actually, he's kind of forced to smuggle 14-year-old Ellie out of a quarantine zone. Now, what starts out as a small job in the game becomes a brutal, heartbreaking journey across the country as Joel and Ellie learn to tolerate, and then actually count on one another. I don't know about this. What's an encouraging sign for the HBO Max adaptations? It's done by Craig Mazin. He did Chernobyl. That is a brutal watch. And unfortunately, Neil Druckmann is writing and executive producing the show. Now, the first season will adapt the events of the original game. That's not true. This article says it is, but I did a video about a year ago where they said it was not going to follow the original story. Now, this article says it's expected to include elements of the sequel, that being The Last of Us Part 2, which means this is probably going to be this is going to be the Abby show with all kinds of trans bullshit and transhumanist shit, because that's what Neil Druckmann's all about. Druckmann recently confirmed that the series will take some liberties with the story. Abandon all hope. First season of Last of Us will consist of 10 episodes and is set to hit small screens on streaming on HBO January 15th. That's all I've got. And of course, my phone has to ding while I'm finishing up. I am Salty Traveling Sea. I hope you're having a good week. I'll talk to you real soon.